Okay, this is going to be a little longer than the usual things that I bring because it's not only things that happened, but it's things that I was thinking. This is especially dedicated to my darling niece Debbie and of course everybody else. So it happened like this. When I finished high school, I was only 17 and a half years old because I worked fast to get rid of the high school problem. And my dad said to me, I told my dad I want to go to a training village, Akshara, for getting ready to go to Israel. So he said, Ich geb nicht oisken halbe gebachene. I don't let anything half-baked out of my house. And he forced me to stay until my 18th birthday, which was in the beginning of 1949. And I had a half a year. I went to Brooklyn College, and I only remember one course, and it was Greek philosophy. And I started buying old used books on the Greek philosophy, and I read Plato, and I read Socrates and Aristotle, and I read, but mainly Plato really had me taken because of his logic. And I believed every word I read. And I came to Israel, I had a trunk full of books, they all got wet on the bottom of the boat, and we saved maybe 5 or 10. And the ones that we saved stayed with me but you know, I was first of all in Geva, then I moved to Urim, then I moved to Bet Shemesh, and then I built a house in Bet Shemesh, and finally in 2018 we moved here to our new place. And in 2020, I just turned 90, 2021, I just turned 90. I was looking around the books in my bookshelf and I see this old book. And it was a book, I think it was from 1930 something, but it was on ethics. It didn't even mention Plato. But the first thing they had there was Plato's allegory of the cave. When I read the allegory of the cave, he wrote this in order to prepare people to accept his picture of the state. So I took every word and I said, yes, he's right. And the cave goes like this. He said, people are sitting tied to a wall in a cave, and what they see on the wall are reflections. But they're tied, they only see in that direction. They see the reflections of what's going on behind them. Where life is going on, people are doing things and living. And behind the people that are doing things and living is a great big fire that's fed by light, by air from the outside of the cave. And so that's what and we're sitting there and all we see is the reflections. One of the guys got himself loose, broke out of his bonds, went and saw what was going on, came to try and tell people there, look, what you see is not right, everything that's going on is behind them. And of course they didn't believe him, of course, because everybody believes what they see more than what you try and tell them, even though what you try and tell them is the actual truth and what they see is false. And that's human nature. I was wondering a long time why it's human nature, and I think it's human nature because we have to have some kind of story in life. And the story is built on everything that we have seen. If we don't have a story of who we are, then it's like we don't live. And then the whole thing with death comes crashing down, and nobody wants that. So we hold on to the stories as we know them. And it's very, very hard to change people's minds. So he proved this that way, but he said that the guy that got loose found a way of climbing up towards the light. And as he climbed up towards the light, more and more he saw truth. Because the light was the sun. In the sun there's absolute truth. No one can actually get there, but you can approach it as much as you can. And he went down and found someone else who also went up. And what happened was, little by little, there were people who were climbing up towards the sun. Most of them would stop somewhere along the line, and the ones that were fairly up high, they became teachers. They were able to go down and talk to the people and to show them more and more what was going on behind them. The ones who kept going on higher, according to Plato, were the ones who should be the governors of the new state, because they had the greatest amount of knowledge, they had come closest to the absolute truth, and that way, little by little, the whole state will start from the point of being tied and seeing just reflections to approaching more and more towards the true light. This was the way Plato was trying to make his idea of the state, of the ideal state, more palatable. We used this when I was studying education years and years later, in the 60s, to try and understand how teaching should be working. But that was it, it was there. And here in 2021, I'm 91 years old, Odmat, in a short time, and I find this book, and I reread the allegory of the state, of the cave, and I say, wait a minute, what's the sun being one? Everybody knows that all the stars are suns. So he says that's one absolute truth. It means there's got to be a lot of absolute truths. Every star. He didn't know that. He said all people are the same. We know that's not true today. The DNA of everyone is different. The only thing is the same is the way we get born, our physical form, and that's about it. Everything else is different. Even the birth is different for each one, because it's a different kind of birth. Every kid coming out has his own pains and his own troubles until he can begin to breathe. So I started saying, well, okay, the sun is not one sun. There's not one truth only. People are not the same. And yet every society in the world today, and every school system in all the various countries, assume that all people are the same. For what reason? Because it's easier. But that is not the case. Human beings, I think, are like cows, sheep, but really mostly like goats. Because cows stay in a herd and they stay together. Sheep stay together. Goats stay together, but when one of them is hungry, he jumps on a tree and he'll come and catch up later. That's people. We have two parts. One part is we have ourselves. We know what's good for us. We know what makes us feel good. And two, we need society. We must have other people. So we build families, we get married, we have children, but we have to have community. Without community, we are lost. Just like without the flock, the sheep is lost. That's the way we are. But strangely, what happens is that every society says we're all the same. And then parents, what do? They try and get their kids to fit into society, because if he doesn't fit, something is wrong. But we're all different. It's society's job to create a society that holds the greatest amount of difference. And if it can't, then it's not as good. It could be a fine society. In Israel, the Haredi society live very well together. Well, not that well, but they live. But they can't live with the gays together. They can't live with people who eat pig or clams. They can't live. They're threatened by it. Here we have a country that tries to mix everything together, and we're paying the price. The community, from the way I can see it now, that is the best. They used to say the government that rules best is the government that rules least. I think that's true. Because the government is supposed to allow people to live, not to make them do things. And so the easiest you can build your government, and the more different kinds of human beings you can fit into your government, the better the society from my point of view. However, if you want to have a smaller society, so long as all the people within the society are getting their needs filled, that's fine. So you can have smaller societies that have one or two differences, or you can have societies that take in everybody. Personally, my leaning is towards mixing things up. I learned from the days that I used to breed cows and sheep that when you cross different strains, you get something they call hybrid vigor, and you get a whole generation of animals that are better than either side because they're crossbred. But that's me. Everybody can decide, but we have to recognize that we are people of two parts: my private self and my communal self. And I can't live without either. And it's not just the society. That's why whenever you have a dictatorship, people suffer. Because a democracy at least tries to make room for the variance and differences in the people. And a dictatorship demands that everyone be the same and obey. That's the picture, more or less. That's where I got by, then I said, how would I build the cave today, the allegory? It would be like this. Every human being is a cave of his own. When we talk, we think, what am I going to say? Not what I know how to say. So in this cave, we are all small caves in a larger cave, and we are always throwing on the wall different things. I don't say the same thing to my doctor as I do to a bus driver, and certainly not to my friend or my wife. I'm going to say different things to each one of these people, so that what's coming out is always like a picture on the wall, but not the real me. because I don't even know the real me. And I've been working at it for 70 years at least. And I don't think we ever do know completely. But the more we know of our inner selves, the better we are with other people. So I would say the sun is inside of ourselves. And everybody has it in him. And I would say that people are not born with good and evil. People are born to be good for themselves. And since they need society, for the society that they need. Because, look, every animal tries to... if I have a bug running on the floor and I want to kill it, he sees that I want to kill it, he runs away from me. Every animal tries to maintain its life. Any infant that's born tries to live and to maintain its life. And all the things going around and with the act of birth are shocking and frightening. So there is no birth without some kind of trauma. And we're all relating to that trauma and trying to do things with it. But human beings are good just like animals are good. They don't have bad in them. We don't have bad in us. But we have two different needs and they clash. And therein lies mistakes or problems that arise. Which is why I think it's very important that every government be made up of two kinds of people. The people who are interested in community more above everything, and people who are interested in the various types of people in the community. When you meet that one with the other, you can begin to get a government that could work, provided that the whole country is not too large. Because I think democracy in America is falling apart because the guy that votes has to be represented by somebody who in the neighborhood who's gathering up the votes, and he's bringing it to somebody above him, and the number of factors between the person that votes and the person that's elected is so many that the actual vote loses its meaning. And that's just because of the numbers of people. So I would say a federation would be the best thing in all countries. With that, I have to stop. Hope I didn't bore too many of you.